Thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. We have a very interesting topic today. We've seen, the impact uh, on different segments of the industry which is happening due to the COVID-19 virus. Real estate has contributed 6% to the GDP of India and is the second largest employer. We have almost 52 million people who are part of the labor force of real estate. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Anuj Puri from Anurag with his team. I think Anuj needs no introduction to most of the people. He's clearly been a doyen of the real estate industry, the founder of Anurag, and somebody who spent for more than 30 years on with real estate. He's also joined here with his team. Shobit, who is the MD and CEO of Anurag Capital. Shobit will be joining us in about 10 to 15 minutes. Shobit has about 20 years of experience, has been part of the team at JLL with Anuj, where he was leading the capital market business. We also have Amit, who is the president of Private Wealth and has spent more than 2 decades in banking and real estate. Again, Amit was part of the JLL team and subsequently a part of Anurag. And Anuj, Shobit, and Amit go a long way back. Prashant Thakur, who's the director and head of research at Anurag, has been instrumental in setting up the entire research vertical. Prior to joining Anurag, he has worked with consulting firms like Deloitte, E&Y. So we had circulated a research report which Anurag had put out. Actually, the first report which came up, giving us some idea of what are the near-term and slightly longer-term implications for the real estate sector in India. It was far-reaching because it did talk through trends on commercial real estate, on residential real estate, retail, a fairly exhaustive piece. And without much ado, I'm actually going to ask Anuj to lead discussions out there. Anuj, thanks very much. I know you've been in a lot of webinars, you've been answering a lot of questions. And, after Deepak Parekh's interview yesterday, where he spoke about a significant correction, compromise. Those were the words which he used. It has sent a little bit of shiver as I talked to a lot of my friends on the developer side. But would really, on a much larger view, the real estate space was just about getting its feet together in the first 2-3 months of this year, and suddenly the shock is coming. Would love to get your insights and whatever questions are there online. I would ask everyone to please use the chat box. I'm going to moderate and would get back to all the 3 panelists with respective questions. Over to you, Anuj.
Thank you very much, Pratik, and a very good afternoon to you and your esteemed clients who are on the screen. Really appreciate Pratik, Sanctum organizing this with the high net worth individuals. We've been doing a lot of this with either the developers or the institutions. So we love it, Pratik, that you've got it with the HNIs. It'll be nice to have a more informal Q&A because, the guys on the screen are the most astute at this moment in time. Clearly developers are like, it's like a 220 volt current. So that has gone through their bodies and they're like really stunned at this moment in time. So what I may do is, Pratik, is for your clients, just in say 15-20 minutes, maybe cover what our thoughts are on the various segments. And then a little bit about the sentiment of where the home buyer's thought is, because, that's the largest, play. 84% of Indian real estate is the residential market. And then we can open it up to Q&A. So first I'll say is, Pratik, clearly very different from 2009. A lot of people ask me is that, Anuj, you were running JLL at that time. How was it in 2009? It was very different. I think a lot of it was more greed and wealth destruction at that time. This looks a lot more surreal. You're sort of locked down in your own houses. And this is probably a lot of productivity loss in this. Fortunately, the banks still are pretty strong, and hopefully with the government intervention, they continue to remain strong. The Four sectors that I want to quickly cover before we come on to the funding is the office, retail, residential, and industrial. And industrial, I take it in the last because that is one sector which is really going to benefit out of this entire thing. And we started to see early signs of that. First is Pratik on the office. We had thought that there will be really no impact. I mean, that is one sector that was doing exceptionally well. We think that sector will get impacted. In 2008, I was running JLL at that time, and the headquarters continue to say to me is that cut down your people. This is going to come to you. And Pratik, I used to say, well, we're not. We're decoupled from you. We're insulated. We're not joined at the hip. And 2007 used to be about 35 million square feet of office leasing. 2009, it came down to 21 million. So, it was like really 40% just fell. Then we realized that most of the years leading up to 2008, American corporates were taking more space on lease than the Indian corporates. And that's why the US economy is much more important on the office than actually the Indian economy. Now, if the US economy gets hurt through this crisis, there's definitely going to be pain that we're going to see on the office side. We'll give you some data, which is where our thought is. And that data is also backed by the survey where we surveyed the top 5 office developers and private equity in India who are operating, and the top 5 corporate occupiers. And understood from them is that what is their thought of going forward in terms of the expansion. The hurt may not come immediately. And even in 2008, it came really in March 2009. All this happened in 2008, September. And the reason is, first they really sort out their own home, their own employees, their clients, consolidation of the space in their own home country. Then they start to look at what's happening elsewhere and where they can consolidate. We think is on the office this year, before COVID, 42 million square feet was going to get leased. Last year was 40 million square feet. So it was a fantastic year for the office. We think is that in base case, it may come down to 35 million square feet. And in a more worst case, if US economy does get hit badly, it'll be 28 million square feet. So that 42 may get reduced to 28 million square feet. I think, and if you can call it the good news or balancing news, is that even your supply is going to get constrained because a lot of it was going to get delivered this year because of the supply chain problem and labor problem and, building factories in India not starting. That itself, which was going to be 47 million square feet, in base case, we're saying it'll be 40 million. And in a downside case, it'll be 33 million square feet. When we've spoken with the occupiers and the developers, they've said is that the soft commitment, the hard commitment that the occupiers had given, they're coming back to us and saying is we're not going to go ahead with that expansion. So if you can find an alternate client occupier, please go ahead and lease it out to them. I'll also cover one aspect in the commercial, which is what happens to the rent during the lockdown period. So many of the occupiers have sent notices to the developers to say is that during the lockdown period, we're not going to pay you rent. The developers have reacted in 3 different ways. One saying is that your servers are in our office. They are operational. Your people are using the server. They're operating from home. Why will you not pay us the rent? Second, many of the large private equity, Pratik, did not actually have a force majeure clause only in their lease. This we discovered it now when the private equity came in that, how can he say is because we never put up force majeure only in our leases, in majority of their leases, where I think the tenant really pushed, they had to, but majority of their leases, they did not have a force majeure clause. The third is that the verdict is still out, whether this is going to be considered as a force majeure or not. The lawyers are debating it, whether it's a national calamity and the government is, putting it up, force majeure. There's been a lot that's been roaming around on the WhatsApp, but even till now, there is no clarity if it is or if it isn't. So we do feel is that it'll get damaged, but perhaps, Pratik, it'll be the least damage. The most damage will be the second one that I'm going to come to, even more than residential, is the retail. That, to our mind,
it was the first one that got closed. Mall was the first one. It'll be probably the last one, Pratik, that will open up. When it opens up, the theater will not open, the food court will not open, the restaurants would not open. There'll be social distancing norms in there. And we're getting reports from China that, people are coming into the malls, but they are only coming to buy essentials, not discretionary, not premium, not luxury products. So we think it is going to take time for it to build up. This year, at the beginning of this year, we thought new leasing of 62 lakh square feet was going to happen. We think in base case, it will go down to 43 lakh. In worst case, it may be just 50% of that, which is about 31 lakh square feet. I'll say 4 or 5 things in this one. The Retailers Association of India has said this, that if the developers don't help us during this period on rentals, and if the government does not help us, 30% of our members will not be able to go through this. And I spoke with the chairman of the Retailers Association of India, and I said, really, you are so thinly capitalized that, say a month and a half or 2 months of rent, and you're saying 30% of your occupiers are going to go out of business. He said, no, Anuj, it is not about the rent. It's about a merchandise which is in the store. That merchandise is going to go out of fashion now because the season will change. And hence we'll have to send it out at a discount. Who's going to bear that cost? So the discussion that is now going on with the developers and the retailers is retailers saying there's no question that we're going to pay you during the lockdown. That, by the way, a majority of the developers have agreed as well. So contrary to the office. What the question is now is that after the lockdown opens and your mall opens, we will still not be able to pay you for the next 9 months, because the retailers believe that it will be only gradually that the people will start to come back, if they ever were to come back, given if, the vaccine was to come in there. They're saying is, however, we'll pay you a percentage of turnover. Whatever, turnover we do, depending on the category, we'll pay you a percentage of turnover, but we're not going to pay you a fixed rent. Now, the trouble is that the mall owners have largely taken LRDs from the banks. So they are saying is, well, actually the rent that you were paying was not anyway coming to us. It was going to the bank. And the bank is going to start calling this a default, because if you're saying till 9 months, you're not going to be able to pay the rent, and certainly the revenue share that is going to come in will not come up to the rent. We think it will be probably 25% in the first quarter, 50% in the next quarter, 75% in the next quarter, and then it will come up to 100%. So, that dialogue is going on between the two of them to say is, how do we really cover this up? The third, and why I'm putting this out there is because there will be now opportunities that will start to come up, certainly for the HNIs in there. Many of the, crown jewels of a number of developers will come out into the market, certainly on the office space, I think, Pratik, to be able to buy at perhaps more attractive yields than what it was before we went into COVID-19. But let me just cover quickly on the Resi. I think this, as you rightly said, is, Mr. Parekh's webinar yesterday. Clearly, he said is that do whatever is required to do to go out and sell in there. We think it is going to be very tough for a weak developer, a developer who's relatively unknown, to go out and sell, because a lot of this is going to be lockdown, open, lockdown, open. One of the stronger developers said is that I may actually not want my buyer to come at the construction site. What if the buyer has a virus? And, he contaminates my construction site and I'll have to get quarantined in this entire thing. We had, as it is, the space was getting consolidated. I mean, a lot of these developers had started to go out of business. We thought, it would have been another 18, 24 months when it would have been fully consolidated. We think that's now 4 to 6 months. And that is how, quick this consolidation is going to be. In terms of the sale, I think we're still being optimistic a little bit. And I'll explain you 2 reasons. One is our survey. And the second is, we do believe is that property prices, certainly on the completed units, will get corrected. And hence it will become more attractive. So we think is that in the, again, Pratik, I'll just, for the reference of the full audience, and you're perhaps more aware of it, in India, in 2013, in the top 8 cities, we used to sell 550,000 homes, or we call it as units, 550,000. I mean, 2013 at sort of midnight, if you were to wake me up and say, you know, where is going to be India in terms of sales, I would have said is, at least 1 million, 1.1 million. India doubles every 5 years, and 5.5 lakh would have gone to a 1.1 million, 11 lakh. We've actually come the wrong way. So that 5.5 lakh in 2013 actually came down to 2,60,000 units, which is what we were projecting the sale to be this year. We're saying is in a more sort of optimistic